Alright, so trying something a little bit different today. So I've gotten to know some guys in Exeter who do some audiobook recording, and I thought it'd be kind of neat to try and do that myself. Even if it's just a case of kind of practicing. There are lots of copyright-free books around which are interesting to read, and I figured this might be one of them. So we're doing Japanese fairy tales by Yae Theodora Osaki. I'm going to probably mispronounce a lot of things while doing this. I thought it was possibly a little overbold to try and do something in a language where I don't necessarily know how to pronounce all the words straight away. But, I don't know, it's kind of interesting. I wanted to really see kind of how these fairy tales compared to the kind of ones I'd grown up with, if they had the same kind of ideas going, or if it was significantly different. So let's give it a try. I'm going to be doing this for the next, I think, hour or so. See how it goes. I've got a meeting at 3, so definitely won't be going beyond there. Alright. So let me know, anyone who's watching, if the colour kind of palettes I've chosen here of blue background and white text is okay to read, or if it's a bit too much. Alright, let me move the chat over here so I can get everything on one screen. Okay, so let's talk about the author just a little bit before we get into this. We're going to probably do a couple of stories. So, Yae Theodora Ozaki was an early 20th century translator of Japanese short stories and fairy tales. The translations were fairly liberal, but have been popular and were reprinted several times after her death. Blah, 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 blah. She came from an unusual background. Daughter of a baron, one of the first Japanese men to study in the West. Okay. Okay, so she kind of lived all over the place, and she met the person that she was to marry by getting misaddressed mail to that person. Brilliant. Alright, let's get on with the actual story. I dedicate this book to you and the sweet child friendship that you gave to me in the days spent with you by the southern sea when you used to listen with unfeigned pleasure to these fairy stories from far Japan. And they now remind you of my changeless love and remembrance. Oh, that's very beautiful. Okay, let's just bang into this. All right. So long ago, there lived in Japan a brave warrior known to all as Tawara Toda, or my Lord Bag of Rice. His true name was Fujiwara Hidesato, and there is a very interesting story of how he came to change his name. One day, he sallied forth in search of adventures, for he had the nature of a warrior and could not bear to be idle. So he buckled on his 2 swords, took his huge bow, much taller than himself, in his hand, and slinging his quiver on his back, started out. He had not gone far when he came to the bridge of Seto no Kareshi, spanning one end of the beautiful lake Biwa. No sooner had he set foot on the bridge than he saw lying right across his path a huge serpent dragon. Its body was so big that it looked like the trunk of a large pine tree, and it took up the whole width of the bridge. One of its huge claws rested on the parapet of one side of the bridge, while its tail lay right against the other. The monster seemed to be asleep, and as it breathed, fire and smoke came out of its nostrils. At first, Hidesato could not help feeling alarmed at the sight of this horrible reptile lying in his path, for he must either turn back or walk right over its body. He was a brave man, however, and putting aside all fear, went forward dauntlessly. Crunch, crunch. He stepped now on the dragon's body, now between its coils, and without even one glance backward, he went on his way. He had gone only a few steps when he heard someone calling him from behind. On turning back, he was much surprised to see that the monster dragon had entirely disappeared, and in its place was a strange-looking man, who was bowing most ceremoniously to the ground. His red hair streamed over his shoulders and was surmounted by a crown in the shape of a dragon's head, and his sea-green dress was patterned with shells. Hidesato knew at once this was no ordinary mortal, and he wondered much at the strange occurrence. Where had the dragon gone in such a short space of time, or had it transformed itself into this man? And what did the whole thing mean? While these thoughts passed through his mind, he had come up to the man on the bridge and now addressed him. "Was it you who called me just now?" "Yes, it was I," answered the man. "I have an earnest request to make of you. Do you think you can grant it to me?" "If it is in my power to do so, I will," answered Hidesato. "But first, tell me who you are." "I am the Dragon King of the lake, and my home is in these waters just under this bridge." "And what is it you have to ask of me?" said Hidesato. "I want you to kill my mortal enemy, the centipede, who lives on the mountain beyond." And the Dragon King pointed to a high peak on the opposite shore of the lake. "I have lived now for many years in this lake, and I have a large family of children and grandchildren. For some time past, we have lived in terror. For a monster centipede has discovered our home, and night after night it comes and carries off one of my family. I am powerless to save them. If it goes on much longer like this, not only shall I lose all my children, but I myself must fall victim to the monster. I am therefore very unhappy, and in my extremity I am determined to ask the help of a human being. For many days with this intention I have waited on the bridge in the shape of the horrible serpent dragon that you saw, in the hope that some strong, brave man would come along. But all who came this way, as soon as they saw me, were terrified and ran away as fast as they could. You are the first man I have found able to look at me without fear, so I knew at once that you were the man of great courage. I beg you to have pity upon me. Will you not help me kill my enemy, the centipede?" Hidesato felt very sorry for the Dragon King on hearing his story and readily promised to do what he could to help him. The warrior asked where the centipede lived so that he might attack the creature at once. The Dragon King replied that its home was on the mountain Mikami, that as it came every night at a certain hour to the palace of the lake, it would be better to wait till then. So Hidesato was conducted to the palace of the Dragon King under the bridge. Strange to say, as he followed his host downwards, the waters parted to let them pass, and his clothes did not even feel damp as he passed through the flood. Never had Hidesato seen anything so beautiful as this palace built of white marble beneath the lake. He had often heard of the Sea King's palace at the bottom of the sea, where all the servants and retainers were saltwater fishes, but here was a magnificent building in the heart of Lake Biwa. The dainty goldfishes, red carp, and silvery trout waited upon the Dragon King and his guest. Hidesato was astonished at the feast that was spread for him. The dishes were crystallized lotus leaves and flowers, and the chopsticks were of the rarest ebony. As soon as they sat down, the sliding doors opened, and 10 lovely goldfish dancers came out. Behind them followed 10 red carp musicians with the koto and the samisen. Thus the hours flew by till midnight, and the beautiful music and dancing had banished all thoughts of the centipede. The Dragon King was about to pledge the warrior in a fresh cup of wine when the palace was suddenly shaken by a tramp, as if a mighty army had begun to march not far away. Hidesato and his host both rose to their feet and rushed to the balcony, and then the warrior saw on the opposite mountain 2 great balls of glowing fire coming nearer and nearer. The Dragon King stood by the warrior's side, trembling with fear. The centipede, those 2 balls of fire are its eyes. It is coming for its prey. Now is the time to kill it." Hidesato looked where his host pointed, and in the dim light of the starlit evening, behind the 2 balls of fire, he saw the long body of an enormous centipede winding round the mountains, and the light in its 100 feet glowed like so many distant lanterns moving slowly towards the shore. Hidesato showed not the least sign of fear. He tried to calm the Dragon King. "Don't be afraid. I will surely kill the centipede. Just bring me my bow and arrows." The Dragon King did as he was bid, and the warrior noticed that he only had 3 arrows left in his quiver. He took the bow, and fitting the arrow to the notch, took careful aim and let fly. The arrow hit the centipede right in the middle of its head, but instead of penetrating, it glanced off harmless and fell to the ground. Nothing daunted, Hisato took another arrow, fitted it to the notch of the bow, and let it fly. Again, the arrow hit the mark. It struck the centipede right in the middle of its head, only to glance off and fall to the ground. The centipede was invulnerable to weapons. When the Dragon King saw that even this brave warrior's arrows were powerless to kill the centipede, he lost heart and began to tremble with fear. The warrior saw that he had only one arrow left in his quiver, and if this one failed, he could not kill the centipede. He looked across the waters. The huge reptile had wound its horrid body 7 times round the mountain, and would soon come down to the lake. Nearer and nearer gleamed fireballs of eyes, and the light of its 100th feet began to throw reflections in the still waters of the lake. Then suddenly, the warrior remembered that he had heard that human saliva was deadly to centipedes. But this was no ordinary centipede. This was so monstrous that to even think of such a creature made one creep with horror. Hidesato determined to try his last chance. So taking his last arrow and first putting the end of it in his mouth, he fitted the notch to his bow, took careful aim once more, and let fly. This time, the arrow again hit the centipede right in the middle of its head, but instead of glancing off harmlessly as before, it struck home to the creature's brain. Then with a convulsive shudder, the serpentine body stopped moving, and the fiery light of its great eyes and 100 feet darkened to a dull glare, like the sunset of a stormy day, and then went out in blackness. A great darkness now overspread the heavens. The thunder rolled, and the lightning flashed, and the wind roared its fury, and it seemed as if the world were coming to an end. The Dragon King and his children and retainers all crouched in different parts of the palace, frightened to death, for the building was shaken to its foundation. At last, the dreadful night was over. Day dawned beautiful and clear. The centipede was gone from the mountain. Then Hidesato called to the Dragon King to come out with him on the balcony, for the centipede was dead and he had nothing more to fear. Then all the inhabitants of the palace came out with joy, and Hidesato pointed to the lake. There lay the body of the dead centipede floating on the water, which was dyed red with its blood. The gratitude of the Dragon King knew no bounds. The whole family came and bowed down before the warrior, calling him their preserver and the bravest warrior in all Japan. Another feast was prepared, more sumptuous than the first. All kinds of fish prepared in every imaginable way, raw, stewed, boiled and roasted, served on coral trays, and crystal dishes were put before him, and the wine was the best that Hidesato had ever tasted in his life. To add to the beauty of everything, the sun shone brightly, the lake glittered like liquid diamond, and the palace was 1,000 times more beautiful by day than by night. His host tried to persuade the warrior to stay a few days, but Hidesato insisted on going home, saying that he had now finished what he had come to do and must return. The Dragon King and his family were all very sorry to have him leave so soon, but since he would go, they begged him to accept a small few presents, so they said, in token of their gratitude to him for delivering them forever from their horrible enemy, the centipede. As the warrior stood in the porch taking leave, a train of fish was suddenly transformed into a retinue of men, all wearing ceremonial robes and dragon's crowns on their heads to show that they were servants of the great Dragon King. The presents that they carried were as followed. First, a large bronze bell. Second, a bag of rice. Third, a roll of silk. Fourth, a cooking pot. And fifth, a bell. Hidesato did not want to accept all these presents, but as the Dragon King insisted, he could not well refuse. The Dragon King himself accompanied the warrior as far as the bridge, and then took leave of him with many bows and good wishes, leaving the procession of servants to accompany Hidesato to his house with the presents. The warrior's household and servants had been very much concerned when they found that he did not return the night before, but they finally concluded that he had been kept by the violent storm and had taken shelter somewhere. When the servants on the watch for his return caught sight of him, they called to everyone that he was approaching, and the whole household turned out to meet him, wondering what the retinue of men bearing presents and banners that followed him could mean. As soon as the Dragon King's retainers had put down the presents, they vanished, and Hidesato told all that had happened to him. The presents which he had received from the grateful Dragon King were found to be of magic power. The bell only was ordinary, and as Hidesato had no use for it, he presented it to a temple nearby, where it is hung up to boom out the hour of the day over the surrounding neighbourhood. The single bag of rice, however, much was taken from it day after day for the meals of the knight and his whole family, never grew less. The supply in the bag was inexhaustible. The roll of silk, too, never grew shorter, though time after time long pieces were cut off to make the warrior a new suit of clothes to go to court in at the new year. The cooking pot was wonderful too. No matter what was put into it, it cooked deliciously whatever was wanted without any firing. Truly, a very economical saucepan. The fame of Hidesato's fortune spread far and wide, and as there was no need for him to spend money on rice or silk or firing, he became very rich and prosperous, and was henceforth known as My Lord Bag of Rice. Huh, okay. Well, that's the end of that story. I don't really know what to make of that. I mean, you've got some of the sort of stuff you'd expect to see, which is, a protagonist solving something by being kind of more clever than anything else. Because they kind of start off the story, and I don't think this happens so much in Western fairy tales. They start off the story already sort of hyper competent. And it's kind of more like a demonstration of their competence, the story. I don't know kind of what it's supposed to put across to the audience so much. I guess just that if you're good to people and murder giant wildlife, you'll get rewarded? I don't know. It doesn't have a clear moral. What's one of the things I was kind of looking for would be whether or not this was the case in the Japanese versions of fairy tales. I mean, obviously they're not the same story, but just in the fairy tales in general, whether or not they would have, a specific point to them. I mean, it was entertaining enough, but I don't kind of know what it was, except for an implied bribe that you should help out people. I don't know. Alright, so let's go on to another one. I did have a look through this story, the Tongue-Cut Sparrow, which is... It was kind of a bit eh. It's basically just... this one is very similar to a Western fairy tale. In that it's got... it's kind of, it has got more of a moral. I didn't particularly care for it as a story, though, because it's just a bit too... It is, I guess, a bit too similar to Western fairy tales, which is, in short, it's an old man who has a pet sparrow that he very much cares for. But I think it's the presence of his wife being kind of very shrewish that kind of put me off a bit. But I guess, it's very rare to find female protagonists, I suppose, in stories from this kind of age. Where she hates the sparrow, so for reasons, she cuts the tongue out of the sparrow. All that really accomplishes is to annoy the old man. So he goes... the sparrow flies away. And so the old man goes looking for her. It turns out that she's a fairy. And she gives him a reward for being nice to her. And then the wife goes and looks... goes to try and steal some stuff from that... from the bird fairy. And turns out that she accidentally steals a box full of demons, and so learns her lesson not to be a jerk anymore. Which was kind of a bit lame. It was, I guess if anything it was just too close to being a Western fairy tale where it was just a very straightforward moral of don't be a huge jerk. So we're going to skip that one, and go straight on to this one, which is a little bit more interesting, where I can also mispronounce some more words. So, the story of Urashima Taro, the fisher lad. Long, long ago, In the province of Tango, there lived on the shore of Japan, in the little fishing village of Mizonoye, a young fisherman named Urashima Taro. His father had been a fisherman before him, and his skill had been more than doubly descended to his son, for Urashima was the most skillful fisher in all that countryside, and could catch more bonito and tai in a day than his comrades could in a week. But in the little fishing village, more than for being a clever fisher of the sea, he was known for his kind heart. In his whole life he had never hurt anything, either great or small, and when a boy, his companions had always laughed at him, for he would never join in with them teasing animals, but always tried to keep them from this cruel sport. One soft summer twilight he was going home at the end of a day's fishing when he came upon a group of children. They were all screaming and talking at the tops of their voices and seemed to be in a state of great excitement about something. And on his going up to them to see what was the matter, he saw that they were tormenting a tortoise. First one boy pulled it this way, then another boy pulled it that way, while a third child beat it with a stick, and the fourth hammered its shell with a stone. Now Urashima felt very sorry for the poor tortoise and made up its mind to rescue it. He spoke to the boys. "Look here, boys, you are treating that poor tortoise so badly that it will soon die." The boys, who were all of an age when children seem to delight in being cruel to animals, took no notice of Urashima's gentle reproof, but went on teasing it as before. One of the older boys answered, "Who cares whether it lives or dies? We do not. Here, boys, go on, go on!" And they began to treat the poor tortoise more cruelly than ever. Urashima waited a moment, turning over in his mind what would be the best way to deal with the boys. He would try to persuade them to give up the tortoise to him. So he smiled at them and said, "I'm sure you are all good, kind boys. Now won't you give me the tortoise? I would like to have it so much." "No, we won't give you the tortoise," said one of the boys. "Why should we? We caught it ourselves." "What you say is true," said Urashima, "but I do not ask you to give it to me for nothing. I will give you some money for it. In other words, the Oji-san will buy it off of you. Won't that do for you, my boys?" He held up the money to them, strung on a piece of string through a hole in the center of each coin. "Look, boys, you can buy anything you like with this money. You can do much more with this money than you can with that poor tortoise. See what good boys you are to listen to me." The boys were not bad boys at all, they were only mischievous, and as Urashima spoke, they were won by his kind smile and gentle words, and began to be of his spirit, as they say in Japan. Gradually, they all came up to him, the ringleader of the little band, holding out the tortoise to him. "Very well, Doshi-chan. We'll give you the tortoise if you'll give us the money." So Urashima took the tortoise and gave the money to the boys who, calling to each other, scampered away and were soon out of sight. Then Urashima stroked the tortoise's back, saying as he did so, "Oh, you poor thing, there, you are safe now. They say that the stork lives for 1,000 years, but the tortoise for 10,000 years. You have the longest life of any creature in this world, and you were in great danger of having that precious life cut short by those cruel boys. Luckily, I was passing by and saved you, so life is still yours. Now I'm going to take you back to your home, the sea, at once. Do not let yourself be caught again, for there may be no one to save you next time." All the time that the kind fisherman was speaking, he was walking quickly to the shore and out upon the rocks. Then putting the tortoise into the water, he watched the animal disappear and turned homewards himself, for he was tired and the sun had set. The next morning, Urashima went out as usual in his boat. The weather was fine and the sea and sky were both blue and soft in the tender haze of the summer morning. Urashima got into his boat and dreamily pushed out to sea, throwing his line as he did so. He soon passed the other fishing boats and left them behind him till they were lost to sight in the distance, and his boat drifted further and further out upon the blue waters. Somehow, he knew not why, he felt unusually happy that morning, and he could not help wishing that, like the tortoise he set free the day before, he had thousands of years to live instead of his own short span of human life. He was suddenly startled from his reverie by hearing his own name called. Urashima! Urashima! Clear as a bell and soft as the summer wind, the name floated across the sea. He stood up and looked in every direction, thinking that one of the other boats had overtaken him. But gaze as he might over the wide expanse of water, near or far there was no sign of the boat, so the voice could not have come from any human being. Startled, and wondering who or what it was that had called him so clearly, he looked in all directions round him, and saw that without his knowing, a tortoise had come to the side of the boat. Urashima saw with surprise that it was the very tortoise he had rescued the day before. "Well, Mr. Tortoise," said Urashima, "was it you who called my name just now?" The tortoise nodded its head several times and said, "Yes, it was I. Yesterday, in your honorable shadow, my life was saved, and I have come to offer you my thanks and to tell you how grateful I am for your kindness to me." "Indeed," said Urashima. "That is very polite of you. Come up into the boat. I would offer you a smoke, but as you are a tortoise, doubtless you do not smoke." And the fisherman laughed at the joke. "He he he he," laughed the tortoise. "Sake? All right, fine. It's my favorite refreshment, but I do not care for tobacco." "Indeed," said Urashima. "I regret very much that I have no sake in my boat to offer you. But come up and dry your back in the sun. Tortoises always love to do that." So the tortoise climbed into the boat, the fisherman helping him, and after an exchange of complimentary speeches, the tortoise said, "Have you ever seen Ringen, the palace of the Dragon King of the Sea Urashima?" The fisherman shook his head and replied, "No. Year after year the sea has been my home. Though I have often heard of the Dragon King's realm under the sea, I have never yet set eyes on that wonderful place. It must be very far away if it exists at all." "Is that really so? You've never heard of this? You have never seen the Sea King's palace? Then you have missed seeing one of the most wonderful sights in the whole universe. It is far away at the bottom of the sea, but if I take you there, we shall soon reach the place. If you would like to see the Sea King's land, I will be your guide." "I should like to go there, certainly." "Yes, it's right. It's time to go under the sea." "I should like to go there, certainly, and you are very kind to think of taking me, but you must remember that I am only a poor mortal and have not the power of swimming like a sea creature such as you are." Before the fisherman could say much more, the tortoise stopped him, saying, What? You need not swim yourself. If you ride on my back, I will take you without any trouble on your part." "But," said Urashima, "how is it possible for me to ride on your small back?" "It may seem absurd to you, but I assure you that you can do so. Try it once. Just come and get on my back and see if it is as impossible as you think." As the tortoise finished speaking, Urashima looked at its shell, for strange to say, he saw that the creature had suddenly grown so big that a man could easily sit on its back. "This is strange indeed," said Urashima. "Then, Mr. Tortoise, with your kind permission, I will get on your back." Dokoisho. So this is a thing apparently the Japanese people say as a kind of, when they're going to go do something difficult, it's like a kind of, oh, sheesh. Especially something physically difficult. Dokoisho. I had to do a bit of research to try and find out how to even... Dokoisho. I think probably like more fluid than that. But it's apparently it's a very Japanese phrase, which I guess doesn't translate directly across. They didn't try. So Dokoisho, he exclaimed as he jumped on. The tortoise, with an unmoved face, as if the strange proceeding were quite an ordinary event, said, "Now we will set out at our leisure." And with these words, he leapt into the sea with Urashima on his back. Down through the water the tortoise dived. For a long time these two strange companions rowed through the sea. Urashima never grew tired, nor his clothes moist with the water. At last, far away in the distance, a magnificent gate appeared, and behind the gate, the long, sloping roofs of a palace on the horizon. "Yeah," exclaimed Urashima. "That looks like the gate of some large palace just appearing. Mr. Tortoise, can you tell what that place is we can now see?" "That is the great gate of Ringin Palace. The large roof you see behind the gate, it's the Sea King's palace itself." "Then we have at last come to the realm of the Sea King and to his palace," said Urashima. "Yes, indeed," answered the tortoise. "And don't you think we have come very quickly?" And while he was speaking, the tortoise reached the side of the gate. "And here we are. And you must please walk from here." The tortoise now went in front and, speaking to the gatekeeper, said, "This is Urashima Taro from the country of Japan. I have the honor of bringing him as a visitor to this kingdom. Please show him the way." Then the gatekeeper, who was a fish, of course, at once led the way through the gate before them. The red bream, the flounder, the sole, the cuttlefish, and all the chief vassals of the Dragon King of the Sea now came out with courtly bows to welcome the stranger. "Urashima-sama! Urashima-sama! Welcome to the Sea Palace, the home of the Dragon King of the Sea. Thrice welcome are you, having come from such a distant country. And you, Mr. Tortoise, we are greatly indebted to you for all your trouble in bringing Urashima here." Then, turning again to Urashima, they said, "Please follow us this way." And from here the whole band of fishes became his guide. Urashima, being only a poor fisher lad, did not know how to behave in a palace, but strange though it was all to him, he did not feel ashamed or embarrassed, but followed his kind guides quite calmly, where they led to the inner palace. When he reached the portals, a beautiful princess with her attendant maidens came out to welcome him. She was more beautiful than any human being, and was robed in flowing garments of red and soft green like the underside of a wave, and golden threads glimmered through the folds of her gown. Her lovely black hair streamed over her shoulders in the fashion of a king's daughter many hundreds of years ago, and when she spoke, her voice sounded like music over the water. Urashima was lost in wonder while he looked upon her, and he could not speak. Then he remembered that he ought to bow, but before he could make a low obeisance... Obeisance? I don't even know how to say that word. The princess took him by the hand and led him to a beautiful hall, and to the seat of honor at the upper end, and bade him to be seated. "Urashima Taro, it gives me the highest pleasure to welcome you to my father's kingdom," said the princess. "Yesterday you set free a tortoise, and I've sent for you to thank you for saving my life, for I was that tortoise. Now, if you like, we shall live here forever, in the land of eternal youth, where summer never dies, and where sorrow never comes, and I will be your bride, if you will, and we will live together happily forever afterwards." As Urashima listened to her sweet words and gazed upon her lovely face, his heart was filled with a great wonder and joy, and he answered her, wondering if it was not all a dream. "Thank you 1,000 times for your kind speech. There is nothing I could wish for more than to be permitted to stay here with you in this beautiful land, of which I have often heard, but have never seen to this day. Beyond all words, this is the most wonderful place I have ever seen." While he was speaking, a train of fishes appeared, all dressed in ceremonial, trailing garments. One by one, silently and with stately steps, they entered the hall, bearing on coral trays delicacies of fish and seaweed, such as no one can dream of, and this wondrous feast was set before the bride and bridegroom. The bridal was celebrated with dazzling splendor, and in the Sea King's realm there was great rejoicing. As soon as the young pair had pledged themselves in the wedding cup of wine, 3 times 3, Music was played, and songs were sung, and fishes with silver scales and golden tails stepped in from the waves and danced. Urashima enjoyed himself with all his heart. Never in his whole life had he sat down to such a marvelous feast. When the feast was over, the princes asked the bridegroom if he would like to walk through the palace and see all there was to be seen. Then the happy fisherman, following his bride, the Sea King's daughter, was shown all the wonders of that enchanted land where youth and joy go hand in hand, and neither time nor age can touch them. The palace was built of coral and adorned with pearls, and the beauties and wonders of the palace were so great that the tongue fails to describe them. But to Urashima, more wonderful than the palace was the garden that surrounded it. Here was to be seen at one time the scenery of 4 different seasons. The beauties of summer and winter, spring and autumn were displayed to the wandering visitor at once. First, when you looked to the east, the plum and cherry trees were seen in full bloom, the nightingales sang in the pink avenues, and butterflies flitted from flower to flower. Looking to the south, all the trees were green in the fullness of summer, and the day cicada and the night cricket chirped soundly. Looking to the west, the autumn maples were ablaze like a sunset sky, and chrysanthemums were in perfection. Looking to the north, the change made Urashima start, for the ground was silver white with snow, and trees and bamboos were also covered with snow, and the pond was thick with ice. And each day there were new joys and new wonders for Urashima, and so great was his happiness that he forgot everything, even the home that he had left behind, and his parents, and his own country. And 3 days passed without his even thinking of all he had left behind. Then his mind came back to him, and he remembered who he was, and that he did not belong to this wonderful land, or the Sea King's palace, and he said to himself, "Oh dear, I must not stay on here, for I have an old father and mother at home. What could have happened to them in all this time? How anxious they must be in these days when I did not return as usual. I must go back at once without letting one more day pass." And he began to prepare for the journey in great haste. Then he went to his beautiful wife, the princess, and bowing low before her, he said, "Indeed, I have been very happy with you for a long time, Otohime-sama. And you have been kinder to me than any words can tell. But now I must say goodbye, and I must go back to my old parents." And Otohime-sama began to weep and said softly and sadly, "Is it not well with you here, Urashima, that you wish to leave me so soon? Where is the haste? Stay with me yet another day only." But Urashima had remembered his old parents, and in Japan the duty to parents is stronger than everything else, stronger than pleasure or love, and he would not be persuaded, but answered, "Indeed, I must go. Do not think that I wish to leave you, it is not that. I must go and see my old parents. Let me go for one day, and I will come back to you." "Then," said the princess sorrowfully, "there is nothing to be done. I will send you back today to your father and mother, and instead of trying to keep you with me one more day, I shall give you this as a token of our love. Please take it back with you." And she brought him a beautiful lacquer box tied about with silken cord and tassels of red silk. Urashima had received so much from the princess already that he felt some compunction in taking the gift and said, "It does not seem right for me to take yet another gift from you after all the many favours I have received at your hands, but because it is your wish, I will do so." Then he added, "Tell me, what is this box?" "Ah, Hero Gaming, thanks for dropping by." Where were we? "Tell me, what is this box?" "That," answered the princess, "is a tamate bako," the box of the jeweled hand, "and it contains something very precious. You must not open this box, whatever happens. If you open it, something dreadful will happen to you. Now promise me that you will never open this box. And Urashima promised that he would never open the box, whatever happened. Then bidding goodbye to Otohime-sama, he went down to the seashore, the princess and her attendants following him, and there he found a large tortoise waiting for him. That must have been awkward. He quickly mounted the creature's back and was carried away over the shining sea into the east. He looked back to wave his hand to Otohime-sama, till at last he could see her no more, and the land of the Sea King and the roofs of the wonderful palace were lost in the far, far distance. Then, with his face turned eagerly towards his own land, he looked for the rising of the blue hills on the horizon before him. At last, the tortoise carried him into the bay he knew so well, and to the shore from whence he had set out. He stepped onto the shore and looked about him while the tortoise rowed away to the Sea King's realm. But what is the strange fear that seizes Urashima? I know, Harry, what a weird choice of gift. But I did read this one through before. It will, don't worry, it's going to pay off. Where were we? Yes, but what is the strange fear that seizes Urashima as he stands and looks about him? Why does he gaze so fixedly at the people that pass him by, and why do they in turn stand and look at him? The shore is the same and the hills are the same, but the people that he sees walking past him have very different faces to those he had known so well before. Wondering what it can mean, he walks quickly towards his old home. Even that looks different, but a house stands on the spot and he calls out, "Father, I have just returned." And he was about to enter when he saw a strange man coming out. "Perhaps my parents have moved while I have been away and have gone somewhere else," was the fisherman's thought. Somehow, he began to feel strangely anxious. He could not tell why. "Excuse me," he said to the man who was staring at him, "but till within the last few days I have lived in this house. My name is Urashima Taro. Where have my parents gone whom I left here?" A very bewildered expression came over the face of the man, and, still gazing intently on Urashima's face, he said, "What? Are you Urashima Taro?" "Yes," said the fisherman, "I am Urashima Taro." "Ha ha ha," laughed the man. "You must not make such jokes. It is true that once upon a time a man called Urashima Taro did live in this village, but that is a story 300 years old. He could not possibly be alive now." When Urashima heard these strange words, he was frightened and said, Please, you must not joke with me. I am greatly perplexed. I am really Urashima Taro, and I have certainly not lived 300 years. Till 4 or 5 days ago, I lived on this spot. Tell me what I want to know, without more joking, please." But the man's face grew more and more grave, and he answered, "You may or may not be Urashima Taro, I don't know. But the Urashima Taro of whom I have heard is a man who lived 300 years ago. Perhaps you are his spirit, come to revisit your old home." "Why do you mock me?" said Urashima. "I am no spirit, I am a living man. Do you not see my feet?" And, don. He stamped on the ground, first with one foot and then with the other to show the man. Because Japanese ghosts have no feet. Apparently. "But Urashima Taro lived 300 years ago. That's all I know, it's written in the village chronicles," persisted the man, who could not believe what the fisherman said. Urashima was lost in bewilderment and trouble. He stood looking all around him, terribly puzzled, and indeed, something in the appearance of everything was different to what he remembered before he went away, and the awful feeling came over him that what the man said was perhaps true. He seemed to be in a strange dream. The few days he had spent in the Sea King's palace beyond the sea had not been days at all, they'd been hundreds of years, and in that time his parents had died, and all the people he had ever known, and the village had his parents had died and all the people he had ever known, and the village had written down his story. There was no use in staying here any longer. He must get back to his beautiful wife beyond the sea. He made his way back to the beach, carrying in his hand the box with which the princess had given him, but which was the way? He could not find it alone. Suddenly he remembered the box, the tamate bako. The princess told me when she gave me the box never to open it, that it contained a very precious thing. But now that I have no home, now that I have lost everything that was dear to me, and my heart grows thin with sadness at such a time, if I open the box, surely I shall find something that will help me, something that will show me the way back to my beautiful princess over the sea. There is nothing else for me to do now. Yes, I will open the box and look in. And so his heart consented to this act of disobedience, and he tried to persuade himself that he was doing the right thing in breaking his promise. Slowly, very slowly... Wait, I need more dramatic music for this last part. Slowly, very slowly, he untied the red silk cord. Slowly and wonderingly, he lifted the lid of the precious box, and what did he find? Strange to say, only a beautiful little purple cloud rose out of the box in 3 soft wisps. For an instant it covered his face and wavered over him as if loath to go. Then it floated away like vapor over the sea. Urashima, who had been till that moment like a strong and handsome youth of 24, suddenly became very, very old. His back doubled up with age, his hair turned snowy white, his face wrinkled, and he fell down dead on the beach. Poor Urashima, because of his disobedience, he could never return to the Sea King's realm or the lovely princess beyond the sea. Little children, never be disobedient to those who are wiser than you, for disobedience was the beginning of all the miseries and sorrows of life. Happy, I don't know what you make of that story, but I liked the story. I felt like it was a much more realised story than the certainly the Cut Tongue Sparrow, which is why I skipped it. But what is the message there? I don't know. Yes, it's very Pandora's box, the whole thing, and it makes me wonder, like, if there was, which one influenced each other. I suspect, as much as Schrodinger's cat is still a thing nowadays, like, the idea of stuff being in a box or behind a door is still fascinating, just because as much as we have object permanence now as adults, we don't, if you can't see something, it's kind of, it's the mystery part of it. But the lesson here is a bit weird. Because, like, okay, so, first of all, they kind of set up this whole idea that him going back to his village is, out of obedience to his family. So you're like, okay, but then that turns out to be a huge mistake. Because if he hadn't done that, he would have been totally fine. And then, secondly, while he did disobey, like, a direct promise, it didn't really feel like that was the focus of the story. That only really came in at the end. Yeah, I think you're right, Happy. I would imagine it's probably not like a direct kind of one to another, especially because I think Japan was kind of cut off from a lot of places for a long time. But, like, yeah, the promise was really kind of a small part of that story, and to have the entire story sort of revolve around the idea of this is, keep promises. Especially when that promise came at the cost of another duty that they're trying to push, which is the duty to go and look after your, to go and check in on your parents. And also his duty to his wife. Alongside all of this, of course, you've got the whole thing that there was no indication given to him how he was supposed to get back home afterwards. So, which feels like a little, it's not like a plot hole, but it's just a bit weird that entire thing only came about because of poor communication between the two of them, and no, arrangement to be picked up afterwards, which is just a bit odd. Like, I know a lot of children's stories are kind of like that, where they have sort of holes in the story where you're like, but why didn't they just do this? Wouldn't that have been easier? Like, literally the only reason he broke that promise was not because he really had any great need to, it's just because he was sad and he didn't know what else he was supposed to do. I don't know what the it doesn't really work for me as a morality thing, because it's like, what was he supposed to do at that point? Like, there were no other he didn't have another option. I guess he could have gone fishing. That probably would have made a bit more sense, actually. Yeah. Yeah, Happy. I think you're right. It's like, I mean, it is supposed to be a morality tale, but the morality part of it only really came in right at the end. It really torpedoed any chance of that actually being effective as a morality tale. But it was a fun story, though. I think like a lot of these ones, there wasn't a huge amount of actual plot there. Like he just kind of like, the reason I like this one. Sorry, I've got a cold. The reason I like this one is because it has that extra part of the bit. I like the bit at the beginning where he rescued the turtle. Like that was just done a little bit differently than they would have expected, like in a Western one, where it was more kind of realistic, and you had the whole sort of discussion of kids are jerks, right? I kind of like this. One of my favorite parts is was right at the beginning, where it's like they were won by his kind smile and gentle words, and began to be of his spirit, as they say in Japan. Like I've never heard someone describe something that way before, but I really like it. I think that's it feels like it's more realistic storytelling, at least somewhat. Even if you're dealing with like kind of fantastic things, the stuff that actually happens, well, it could be happening to, in this case, a magical tortoise. The way it's done is still kind of believable, so I like it. I think that's probably going to be all the time I've got, because I've got to have a meeting in about 5 minutes. But yeah, Happy? I don't know. I'll have to. What did you think about it overall? Like, in terms of. Oh yeah, better than the fisher throwing his big catch back into the sea because ooh. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, like that felt a lot more like a real thing than anything else. Because I kind of like it. It's like you've got. I like that it's a story that's got a. It's got a non-traditionally masculine main character in it, which is really ahead of its time for, what's a historical story. So like you've got a different sort of angle here, which I kind of like. Because I've never been one to particularly fit in with like traditional sort of masculine stuff in terms of like sports and things. So I kind of like it when you've got like a non-traditional main character who does it like it's kind of like an inherent character trait which kind of leads forward to it. Yeah, I think the first bit is definitely what really struck me about this. I was sold on the story from the first bit. Yeah, he actually managed to, like, I mean, ultimately he bribed them rather than persuading them, but I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? It's like, I guess that's the choice everyone faces, is what are you willing to give up for your principles? In this case, he was willing to bribe them. Whether or not, like, I feel the story would have taken a very different turn if he came across the tortoise again being tortured by the boys. But he makes a point of saying they were not bad boys at all, only mischievous, even though they were, like, I know nowadays if you found someone who was torturing animals, you would think, I don't think it would be treated quite as lightly. In fact, I don't think it would be treated anywhere near as lightly. So it's a kind of, that's, I guess, one of the things looking to get from this is to try and see how different kind of values and things change. But it's an interesting combination of stuff where it's like they're presenting this like pacifist, animal loving person in the same story where it's also excusing animal cruelty at the same time. So like it's interesting. Like that's an interesting juxtaposition of ideas. Especially because it's like it's pretty like that's pretty not like graphic but like very evocative and kind of icky to sort of read that kind of idea because it comes across quite clearly. But anyway, I gotta get going. But Happy, I'm gonna try and do. Yes, Happy, I think you're right. That's kind of where I was going with that. It's like that. It definitely is a strong signal that someone's gonna have a distinct lack of empathy if they would torture animals. But I think that's all I've got time for today. But I'm gonna try and maybe find a sort of regular slot to do. What day is it today? So it's Wednesday. Yeah, Happy. I might see if I can do a regular story reading kind of thing. What did you think about the music? Is the music okay? Like, I know it's a bit all over the place, so I just sort of grabbed it from various different places. But is it better with music, without music? I know, because... Okay, the music's good? Cool. Because I didn't know, like, whether I should have, like, sort of less... I think I'm going to try and find some more music which is more ambient, so it's more just, like, sort of background noise. And I think I'll try and find specific kind of bits of music for dramatic sections, which I can switch to. And then, yeah, and I think that should be good. I think some of them are a little bit, you know, a little too intrusive, but otherwise it's good. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to make up a new role on my Discord for people who are interested in this story stuff, but I'll give this another try at 2 o'clock next Wednesday. But cheers, Happy. I will do my best at the meeting. But yeah, I hope you have a great day as well in Ireland. And I'll hopefully see you next week.